What if I told you that some of the most effective medicines you could possibly use are growing wild in ditches, abandoned lots, and possibly your own backyard right now? Plants that our grandparents knew by name, that healed soldiers on battlefields, that carried entire civilizations through centuries without a single pharmacy, a single prescription, or a single synthetic compound. Most people have forgotten this. While we reach for the medicine cabinet for every cough, cut, and ache, there are plants out there that have been healing human beings for thousands of years. Plants that clinical research is now confirming actually work. Today I am going to walk you through 20 of them, starting with the most surprising and working toward the ones that will make you look at every weed, every meadow, and every hedgerow in a completely different way. Stick around because number 3 on this list was the primary flu remedy during the great influenza epidemics of the 1800s, and the people who used it swore it could stop a fever in its tracks if caught early enough. And number 1 is a plant that was used to synthesize aspirin. But unlike aspirin, it does not damage your stomach. It actually heals it. And it is probably growing in a ditch near you right now. Let's get into it. Number 1. Meadow Sweet. The plant that aspirin was based on, that was used for pain, fever, and inflammation for centuries before synthetic aspirin existed, and that, unlike the drug derived from it, does not irritate your stomach. It soothes it. Filipendula ulmaria contains salicylates, the same class of compounds that aspirin is based on. When chemists first synthesized aspirin in the 1800s, they derived the chemistry from salicylic acid found in plants like meadowsweet and willowbark. They named it aspirin. The A from acetyl, the spire from spirea, the old botanical name of meadowsweet. Then they sold it back to the world as a pharmaceutical, stripped of everything that surrounded it in the original plant. Here is what they stripped out. Meadowsweet's mucilaginous compounds that coat and protect the stomach lining, while the salicylates do their work. Traditional herbalists used meadowsweet specifically for headaches and joint pain in people who could not tolerate other remedies because of stomach sensitivity. Modern research confirms anti-inflammatory effects from the salicylates and a gastroprotective effect from the whole plant that the isolated compound does not have. The flowers and leaves are dried for tea. The taste is pleasant, slightly sweet, with an almond-like aroma from the salicylate compounds. Meadowsweet grows in wet meadows and along streams, producing creamy white clusters of fragrant flowers in summer. Think of it as the plant that taught aspirin everything it knows and kept the part aspirin threw away. Number 2 grows not from soil but from the bark of trees. It looks like pale green hair hanging from branches. Most people walk past it in the forest without a second thought. Traditional healers called it by a name that tells you exactly what they thought of it. Number 2. Usnea, the lichen that grows hanging from trees like old man's beard, containing usnic acid with documented antimicrobial activity against bacteria, including some antibiotic-resistant strains, used by wilderness healers for centuries as a topical infection fighter. Usnea is technically a lichen, a symbiotic organism, not a plant. But it has been used as medicine for as long as traditional herbalism has records. It grows hanging from tree branches in relatively unpolluted forests, particularly in the Pacific Northwest and mountain regions. The compound usnic acid has been studied extensively for antimicrobial activity against gram-positive bacteria, including Staphylococcus aureus and Mycobacterium tuberculosis strains that have shown resistance to standard antibiotics. The traditional wilderness use was practical and direct. If you cut yourself on a hike with no first aid supplies, fresh usnea could be moistened and applied directly to the wound as an antimicrobial dressing. Modern research confirms this was not wishful thinking. Usnic acid genuinely disrupts bacterial metabolism. Usnea is best extracted as a tincture in alcohol, which draws out the usnic acid more efficiently than water. It should be harvested sustainably, only from fallen branches or in small amounts from healthy trees, never stripped in quantity. Think of it as the antibiotic that has been quietly growing on trees, waiting for someone to remember it exists. Number 3. Bone set. The flu remedy that was so well known in the 1800s that practically every American household kept dried bone set on hand, named because the deep muscle aches of influenza were called breakbone fever, and this plant seemed to cure them. Eupatorium perfoliatum was one of the most important medicines during the great influenza epidemics of the 19th century. At the first sign of fever, chills, deep muscle aching, and exhaustion, people made a hot tea of the dried leaves and flowers and went to bed. Traditional herbalists described it as a febrifuge, fever reducer, and immune stimulant that helped the body mount an effective response rather than suppressing the fever entirely. The traditional approach was specific. Drink the tea as hot as you can tolerate at the very onset of symptoms, get into bed, and allow the body to sweat through the fever. Many who used it swore it could stop a flu in its tracks if begun in the first few hours. The tea is intensely bitter. Some say the most bitter medicinal tea they have encountered. And that bitterness was understood as part of what made it work, stimulating the immune and digestive response simultaneously. Boneset grows in wet meadows and along streams, producing flat clusters of white flowers in late summer. Robust modern clinical trials are still limited, but the ethnobotanical record is among the most consistent of any American medicinal plant. Think of it as the medicine that kept families alive through epidemics that killed others, not because it was exotic, but because it was known. Number 4. Elecampane, the deep lung tonic that herbalists reached for when someone had a chest infection that simply would not resolve, containing sesquiterpene lactones with documented antimicrobial activity against respiratory pathogens. Inula helenium was the remedy traditional healers turned to when someone had a deep, stubborn lung infection, the kind of wet, productive cough that persists for weeks after an ordinary illness, or the lingering chest weakness that follows pneumonia. The thick roots contain sesquiterpene lactones with antitussive and antimicrobial effects, and research has confirmed activity against respiratory pathogens including Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Traditional use was always long-term and patient. Small, frequent doses over weeks or months, not a quick fix. The flavor of elecampane root decoction is complex, warming, and aromatic, with a slight bitterness that herbalists considered part of the therapeutic action. Elecampane was often combined with other lung herbs. Mullein for soothing, thyme for antimicrobial action, creating layered preparations for stubborn respiratory conditions. It disappeared from common use partly because it requires patience and partly because antibiotics seemed faster. But for chronic, lingering respiratory weakness that does not respond to standard treatment, elecampane offers something antibiotics do not: genuine rebuilding and strengthening of lung tissue over time. Think of it as the plant that does not just fight the infection, it rebuilds what the infection damaged. Number 5. Barberry, used in Persian, Ayurvedic, and Chinese medicine for over 2,000 years, containing berberine, one of the most studied plant compounds in modern medicine, with confirmed activity against bacteria, fungi, and parasites, and now being researched for antibiotic-resistant strains. Berberis vulgaris contains berberine, an alkaloid present in the bright yellow inner bark of the roots and stems that has been the subject of more modern research than almost any other plant compound. Berberine has documented antimicrobial effects against a broad range of bacteria, fungi, and parasites. It has anti-inflammatory effects. It supports digestive health and has shown clinical efficacy for infectious diarrhea. More recent research has demonstrated metabolic benefits, improved blood sugar control and cholesterol levels, that are now the subject of serious pharmaceutical interest. Traditional use across 3 major medical traditions, Persian, Ayurvedic, and Chinese, consistently targeted digestive infections, liver conditions, and inflammatory disorders. Modern research has confirmed every category of traditional use and added new mechanisms. Berberine is intensely bitter, which is part of what makes it effective for digestion. The bitterness triggers bile and digestive enzyme secretion. Barberry is currently receiving renewed scientific attention specifically because of antibiotic resistance. When synthetic antibiotics stop working, berberine-containing plants become relevant again. Think of it as the ancient medicine that is becoming cutting-edge again, precisely because we are running out of alternatives. Number 6 lives up to its name in the most dramatic and immediate way possible. Chew a single flower, and within seconds, your entire mouth goes numb. Number 6. Toothache plant, containing spilanthol, a compound that creates immediate, intense tingling and numbing in the mouth within seconds of contact, used for centuries as a natural local anesthetic for tooth pain, mouth ulcers, and sore throats. Acmella oleracea, also called the buzz button or electric daisy, produces small yellow and red cone-shaped flowers that look almost like tiny abstract sculptures. Chew one fresh flower, and within 10 to 15 seconds, your entire mouth goes numb, with an intense tingling that is simultaneously peculiar and unmistakably effective. The compound responsible is spilanthol, a fatty acetamide with confirmed local anesthetic and analgesic effects. The numbing effect typically lasts 20 to 40 minutes. Traditional healers in South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia used this plant for toothaches, mouth ulcers, and painful oral conditions for centuries in every culture that found it arriving independently at the same use. It does not address the underlying cause of tooth pain. That requires a dentist. But it provides genuine relief while waiting. It can be grown easily in warm climates or containers and self-seeds prolifically. The flowers carry the strongest effect, though the leaves work as well. Think of it as having dental anesthetic growing in your garden, ready for the moment someone bites down wrong. Number 7. Agrimony, the medieval throat soother whose tannins have been used as a gargle for sore throats, tonsillitis, and laryngitis for over 1,000 years, and whose astringent properties tone inflamed tissue in ways that modern throat lozenges cannot replicate. Agrimonia eupatoria produces tall spikes of tiny yellow flowers along woodland edges and meadows, and has been one of the most consistently used medicinal plants in European herbal tradition for anything involving the mouth, throat, or digestive tract. The plant is rich in tannins, natural astringent compounds that tighten and tone inflamed mucous membrane tissue. When used as a strong tea gargled several times daily, agrimony reduces the swelling and inflammation of sore throats through a mechanical action that no synthetic lozenge replicates. The tannins physically contract the inflamed tissue, reducing the surface area that is irritated and exposed. The same tea drunk for mild diarrhea or digestive upset applies the same toning principle to the gut lining. Agrimony has a mild, slightly bitter, pleasantly herbaceous taste that makes it one of the easier medicinal teas to drink consistently. It has been used for everything from pharyngitis and tonsillitis to urinary problems and mild digestive complaints. Think of it as the throat lozenge that actually heals instead of temporarily numbing, doing something structurally real to the tissue it contacts. Before we go further, if what we are covering today has you thinking about keeping a home medicine cabinet built from plants like these rather than synthetic substitutes, I have put together 3 complete practical guides. A beginner's step-by-step guide to growing and using the most powerful medicinal plants at home, 30 preparation protocols with exact dosage and safety notes, and a complete home apothecary system covering tinctures, salves, and infusions. The kind of knowledge that turns a plant list into an actual practice. The link is in the first pinned comment below whenever you are ready. Now let's keep going. Number 8. White horehound. So effective for coughs that people made it into candy and lozenges sold in every pharmacy and general store through the early 1900s. Containing merobian with confirmed expectorant activity that helps clear lung congestion rather than simply suppressing it. Marubium vulgar was the original cough drop. Before synthetic cough medicines existed, horehound candy was standard, a preparation of the strongly brewed herb boiled down with sugar until it set into hard drops that could be sucked slowly to release the active compounds. The compound merobian stimulates bronchial secretions and helps break up congestion. Unlike cough suppressants that simply block the cough reflex, horehound makes coughing more productive, helping the lungs expel the infection rather than trapping it. This distinction matters. A productive cough that clears the airways is the body healing itself. A suppressed cough that traps mucus is a symptom managed while the underlying infection deepens. The plant grows as a bushy perennial with fuzzy gray-green leaves and small white flowers, the whole aerial part harvested and dried. Traditional preparation was either a strong tea sweetened with honey or the candy form. It is still found in some European cough syrups and throat lozenges, where traditional botanical preparations have never fully disappeared. Think of it as the cough drop that actually wants you to get better, not just stop disturbing people around you. Number 9. Blue vervain, used by traditional herbalists specifically for people who are wound too tight, overthinking, unable to relax or sleep. Containing compounds with documented anxiolytic effects in preliminary research that calm nervous tension without sedating. Verbena hastata and its medicinal relatives were described by traditional herbalists with a specificity that is almost diagnostic. This is the plant for people who hold tension in the jaw and shoulders, who cannot stop their mental chatter, who are exhausted but cannot sleep, because their nervous system will not downregulate. The herbalist's understanding of vervain was that it addressed a specific kind of nervous constitution, not acute anxiety requiring pharmaceutical intervention, but the chronic low-level overdrive that characterizes modern stressed adults with particular accuracy. Animal research and preliminary human studies suggest genuine anxiolytic effects from verbenalin and related iridoid compounds in vervain. It does not sedate. It helps the nervous system find its natural resting state rather than forcing it there. The plant grows wild in wet meadows and ditches, producing tall spikes of tiny, purple-blue flowers. The aerial parts are dried for tea, which is quite bitter and often combined with more pleasant herbs or sweetened with honey. A cup in the evening to help transition from a driven day to genuine rest. Think of it as the friend who puts a hand on your shoulder and says, "It is allowed to stop now." Number 10. Oregon grape. One of the very few herbs with multiple published clinical trials confirming efficacy for chronic skin conditions, containing berberine in the roots and bark with documented antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory effects specifically on skin tissue. Mahonia aquifolium is a spiny evergreen shrub with yellow flowers and blue berries native to the Pacific Northwest. Its bright yellow inner bark and roots contain berberine, the same alkaloid found in barberry, alongside other alkaloids that together produce documented anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial effects on skin. Multiple clinical studies have shown that topical Oregon grape extract significantly improves psoriasis and atopic dermatitis symptoms, with results that have been reproducible across separate trials. Psoriasis and eczema are among the most treatment-resistant chronic conditions in dermatology, conditions where most treatments manage symptoms without addressing underlying mechanisms. Oregon grape appears to modulate the inflammatory pathways driving abnormal skin cell proliferation in psoriasis through berberine's interaction with keratinocyte activity. The effect is not rapid. Consistent topical use over several weeks is needed, but the improvement documented in clinical trials is meaningful. Think of it as the plant that modern dermatology is quietly acknowledging actually works, 2,000 years after traditional medicine knew it first. Number 11. Yellow dock. The alterative herb traditional medicine used for sluggish digestion, chronic constipation, and the skin problems that consistently improve when elimination does, containing bitter compounds and anthraquinones that stimulate bile production and liver function. Rumex crispus root has been used in traditional herbal medicine as what old herbalists called an alterative, a plant that helps the body process and eliminate waste more efficiently rather than forcing it to do so through a laxative mechanism. The root contains bitter compounds that trigger bile production when they reach the duodenum, and anthraquinones that gently stimulate bowel motility over time. The traditional observation was clinical. People with chronic constipation, sluggish digestion, and persistent skin conditions, acne, eczema, psoriasis, who used yellow dock root consistently for weeks, often found that as their digestion normalized, their skin conditions improved simultaneously. This connection between liver function, elimination, and skin expression is one of the oldest observations in herbal medicine, and one that modern functional medicine has increasingly validated through research on the gut-liver-skin axis. Small regular doses in tea or tincture rather than large acute doses represent the traditional approach. The taste is bitter and astringent, which is itself part of the therapeutic signal. Think of it as the plant that does not do the work for your body. It reminds your body how to do it itself. Calendula, the war flower, carried by medieval soldiers into battle specifically for wound treatment, proven in modern clinical trials to accelerate wound healing, including burns and surgical wounds, and still unpatentable because no pharmaceutical company can own a flower. Calendula officinalis produces bright orange and yellow flowers from spring through frost and has one of the most battle-tested reputations in the history of herbal medicine. Medieval soldiers carried dried calendula flowers specifically for treating battlefield wounds. The plant was called the war flower because when you had no surgeon, no antiseptic, and no sterile equipment, calendula could prevent infection and promote clean healing. Modern clinical trials have confirmed exactly this. Calendula extracts speed wound healing, including burns and surgical wounds, through a mechanism involving triterpenoids and flavonoids with documented anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties. Allantoin, also present in calendula, promotes cell proliferation. The practical preparation is straightforward. Dried flowers infused in oil for several weeks, then strained, produce a healing oil that can be used directly or combined with beeswax for a salve. The reason calendula is not in every pharmacy is the reason it was forgotten. Pharmaceutical companies cannot patent a flower. But for anyone wanting effective, safe wound care for minor cuts, burns, and inflamed skin without a prescription, calendula is still growing in gardens everywhere. Think of it as the emergency room in your backyard that has been there all along, waiting to be remembered. Number 13. Sea buckthorn, used in Tibetan, Russian, and Chinese traditional medicine for centuries, containing a rare omega-7 fatty acid that supports mucous membrane health throughout the entire body, and tested by Russian cosmonauts in space as protection against radiation damage to skin and tissue. Hippophae rhamnoides is a spiny shrub with bright orange berries that has been used in traditional medicine across the Himalayas, Siberia, and China for centuries, specifically for healing skin and mucous membranes. The oil extracted from both the berries and seeds contains a suite of vitamins, antioxidants, and fatty acids, including palmitoleic acid, omega-7, a fatty acid rare in plant sources that plays a specific role in mucous membrane health throughout the body. Russian cosmonauts use sea buckthorn oil in space programs to protect against radiation damage to skin and mucous membrane tissue. Clinical trials have confirmed improvement in dry skin, eczema, atopic dermatitis, dry eye syndrome, and vaginal dryness in postmenopausal women, conditions that all involve the same underlying issue: mucous membrane integrity. Most moisturizers address the symptom of dryness by coating the surface. Sea buckthorn oil appears to support the actual cellular integrity of mucous membrane tissue. It heals from the inside when consumed and from the outside when applied. Think of it as the internal repair system in a berry that thrives where almost nothing else will grow. Number 14. Comfrey, called knitbone for centuries, containing allantoin that promotes cell proliferation, proven in multiple modern clinical trials to significantly reduce pain and improve function in ankle sprains, back pain, abrasions, and osteoarthritis when applied topically. Symphytum officinale has one of the most descriptive folk names in herbal medicine: knitbone. For centuries, people used comfrey root and leaves externally on broken bones, sprains, bruises, and torn muscle tissue, and they swore it made healing happen faster. They were right. Allantoin, the primary active compound, promotes cell proliferation, literally encouraging cells to multiply and repair damaged tissue at an accelerated rate. Multiple modern peer-reviewed clinical trials have confirmed that topical comfrey root extract significantly reduces pain and improves function in ankle sprains, back pain, abrasions, and osteoarthritis. These are published studies with control groups, not anecdote. The critical distinction: comfrey is for external use only. The plant contains pyrrolizidine alkaloids that can cause liver damage when consumed internally over time. Used as a salve, cream, or poultice on the skin over soft tissue injuries, it is remarkably safe and effective. A simple comfrey salve made from dried root infused in oil with added beeswax is one of the most useful preparations in a home herbal apothecary. Think of it as the plant that literally tells your body to knit itself back together faster than it would manage alone. Number 15. Mullein, the tall, fuzzy-leaved plant growing in vacant lots and roadsides everywhere, used for hundreds of years for lung congestion, bronchitis, and chest colds, whose saponins act as natural expectorants, helping the lungs clear infection rather than suppressing the cough that is trying to do exactly that. Verbascum species grow as tall, stately plants with soft, velvety leaves and a spike of yellow flowers, the kind of plant you notice when you see it but may never have put a name to. Traditional herbalists called it the lung's best friend. The leaves contain saponins that act as natural expectorants, helping to loosen and move mucus out of the lungs rather than letting it sit and thicken into infection. Traditional preparation involved making a tea from dried leaves, strained carefully through cloth to remove the fine leaf hairs, drunk 2 or 3 times daily during a chest cold. Infused mullein flower oil has also been used traditionally for ear infections, applied warm as drops. Modern research confirms anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial effects on the respiratory system, consistent with traditional use. Mullein helps the lungs do what they are trying to do: expel what does not belong there, rather than suppressing the mechanism that is attempting to accomplish this. It is widely available, grows wild across North America, and costs nothing to harvest from clean areas. Think of it as the maintenance crew for your lungs that has been on call this whole time, waiting to be asked. Number 16. Broadleaf plantain, called white man's foot by Native Americans because it grew everywhere European settlers went, and recognized immediately by indigenous healers as a wound healer, inflammation reducer, and antimicrobial. A clinical trial confirmed it improved second-degree burn healing better than standard treatment. Plantago major grows in lawns, trails, and disturbed soil everywhere. The low-growing weed with oval-ribbed leaves and thin flower spikes that virtually every person in the temperate world has walked past thousands of times without registering. Traditional first aid use was direct and immediate. Crush a fresh leaf or chew it briefly to break cell walls, and apply it to a cut, sting, insect bite, or minor burn. The compounds aucubin and allantoin provide anti-inflammatory, wound healing, and antimicrobial effects that the cell-breaking releases on contact. A clinical trial in Iran found that plantain ointment improved healing of second-degree burns better than standard treatment. A result that confirms what traditional use across Native American, European, and Asian medicine all described independently. For internal use, a strong tea of dried plantain leaves can be used to wash wounds or as a soothing preparation for urinary tract discomfort. The plant is impossible to mistake once you know it, and available free everywhere. Think of it as the emergency room that literally follows you wherever you walk, always at your feet for the moment you need it. Number 17. Yarrow, named after Achilles, who used it to treat his soldiers' wounds, both a hemostatic that stops bleeding and a vulnerary that heals wounds. The only common medicinal plant that reliably does both simultaneously. Achillea millefolium has one of the most direct etymological connections to its medicinal use of any plant in the herbal canon. Achilles, the Greek hero, is recorded in classical sources as using yarrow to stanch the bleeding wounds of soldiers. The Latin name Herbam militaris, the soldier's herb, traveled through European military history into medieval field medicine for exactly the same purpose. The plant is a hemostatic. It contains compounds including a collagen that genuinely accelerate clotting and reduce bleeding time, and simultaneously a vulnerary, containing anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial compounds that support wound healing after bleeding stops. Most plants perform one function well. Yarrow performs both. A University of Thrace study in 2018 found yarrow essential oil showed efficacy against MRSA in laboratory conditions comparable to vancomycin, one of the last resort antibiotics for resistant infections. Traditional use for fever involved a hot yarrow tea to encourage perspiration and break the fever from the surface. Crushed fresh leaves applied directly to a bleeding wound remains one of the most immediately practical pieces of herbal knowledge a person can carry outdoors. Think of it as the field medic that grows wild everywhere and has never asked for anything in return. Number 18. Self-heal, literally named for what it does, used for virtually any wound, sore throat, or inflamed tissue, and now found in research to disrupt bacterial biofilms, the protective structures that make infections resistant to treatment. Prunella vulgaris was named with more confidence than almost any other medicinal plant. Self-heal, heal all. Medieval surgeons called it carpenter's herb because it was the first thing applied to tool wounds on woodworking sites. Traditional Chinese medicine knew it as xiaoqut cow for bacterial infections of glands and throat. Native American and European traditions both used it for wounds, sore throats, and mouth ulcers independently. What makes the modern research on self-heal particularly interesting is the discovery of prunellin, a polysaccharide that appears to interfere with the ability of certain bacteria to adhere to mucosal tissue, addressing one of the earliest steps of infection before it can establish itself. Disrupting biofilm formation, the protective matrices bacteria build to resist antibiotics, is one of the most important targets in modern antimicrobial research. Self-heal grows low in lawns and meadows, producing purple flower spikes that bees love. A simple tea used as a gargle for sore throats or applied to mouth ulcers delivers the active compounds directly to the mucous membrane tissue where they work. Think of it as the plant that took healing so seriously it made it part of its own name, and then spent several thousand years proving it was earned. Number 19. Sassafras, used by Native Americans for fevers, rheumatism, and digestive conditions for centuries, later used to flavor root beer, and now mostly historical, because modern safety testing found a compound that raises concern for liver toxicity at high doses. A plant that teaches us something important. Sassafras albidum has a rich medicinal history. Native American peoples across eastern North America used the root bark for fevers, joint pain, and digestive complaints. European settlers adopted it. It became one of the first North American exports to Europe as a valuable medicinal commodity. The roots have a distinctive spicy aroma from volatile oils that produce warming, stimulating effects. Traditional uses were real and the plant was genuinely valued across cultures. But sassafras contains safrole, a compound that in large amounts has demonstrated potential liver toxicity and carcinogenic effects in animal studies at high doses. Because of this, internal use is now restricted in many places, and the FDA banned safrole as a food additive in 1960. Sassafras today is primarily historical, interesting to understand in context but not recommended for regular internal use. This is an important case. Traditional use tells us what to investigate. Modern safety testing tells us when to find alternatives. The two work together rather than against each other. Not all traditional plants are safe for all uses, and acknowledging this honestly is part of what makes herbal knowledge trustworthy. Think of it as the plant that taught us to respect both ancient wisdom and modern analysis. Because knowing when something should be set aside is also a form of knowledge. Number 20. Red clover. So common that most people treat it as a lawn weed, containing isoflavones with mild estrogenic activity that research has confirmed reduce menopausal hot flashes and support bone density, a field medicine that literally carpets the ground waiting to be noticed. Trifolium pratense has been used medically for centuries, particularly for skin conditions, chronic inflammation, and women's health. The flowers contain isoflavones, plant compounds with structural similarity to estrogen that interact with estrogen receptors in tissue. Research has confirmed benefits for menopausal hot flash frequency and intensity, and a double-blind study found red clover isoflavone supplementation reduced spinal bone loss by 45% over 1 year compared to placebo. Traditional topical use for chronic skin conditions like eczema and psoriasis has partial modern validation through the anti-inflammatory activity of the isoflavones. The flowers can be harvested from clean areas, away from chemical treatment, dried and made into a pleasantly mild, slightly sweet tea. Long-term use over weeks to months is the traditional approach for hormonal and skin conditions. Red clover also fixes nitrogen in soil as it grows, improving the ground for everything around it. A plant that gives to its environment while it gives to the people who use it. Think of it as the field medicine that carpets the ground just waiting for someone to realize what they have been mowing over. We have treated it as a weed. For centuries before us, it was considered medicine. 20 plants, all of them forgotten, all of them still growing, most of them within reach of wherever you are reading this. For anyone who watched all the way through, the complete practical guide to identifying, preparing, and using plants like these correctly is in the first pinned comment below. Preparation details, dosage, and the safety context that most sources skip. Use the code FULLVIDEO at checkout for 20% off. The link is in the pinned comment whenever you are ready. Before you go, one thing worth sitting with. These plants did not disappear because they stopped working. They disappeared because something more profitable replaced them. The pharmaceutical model requires compounds that can be patented, standardized, and sold. A flower cannot be patented. A weed growing in a ditch cannot be sold with a markup. So it was forgotten, not because it failed, but because it could not be owned. The plants are still there. They have been there the whole time, growing quietly in ditches and meadows and hedgerows, doing exactly what they have always done, waiting for someone to remember what they are for. Tell me in the comments, which of these 20 surprised you most? Which one are you going to find first? Drop it below. I read every comment. Share this with someone who still runs to the pharmacy for every cough and cut. Subscribe and ring the bell. I will see you in the next one.